Welcome to Simplify to Scale, a show dedicated to helping you scale a high impact and high profit business that you love without all of the complexity and chaos that can keep you trapped in the day-to-day. I'm your host, Krista Grasso, and with decades of scaling experience, I know what actually works and what's just hype. So if you are done with all of the one-size-fits-all scaling advice and all of the overnight success promises, and instead you want proven practical strategies that will help you simplify operations, elevate your leadership, amplify profits, and scale sustainably, let's dive in and get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Simplify to Scale show. So I just wrapped up my one-day strategic planning retreat for next year, and it was such a great session, but there were a couple questions that people asked that I thought you might be interested in hearing and that might shape some of the decisions that you're making as you go into next year. So there's two things in particular I want to share in today's episode. One is a way to be thinking about the year to make sure that you are setting yourself up for success and scale. And the other is related to ensuring that you're hiring the right people at the right level. So, one of the activities that I do every single time I host a retreat, whether it is in person or whether it is virtual, is something that I call future casting. And attendees of this year's retreat were asked to set their vision in advance. So they all came in with a vision of not only where they saw their business long term, but specifically what they saw for their business for the new year. And this is something I recommend every founder do. If you do not yet have this vision, we'll link down below in the show notes some of my prior episodes I've done on some good questions to help guide you in getting clear on your vision. Because that's really important and you do want that. It's part of your rich, fulfilled life and part of what should be driving a lot of the decisions that you're making next year. But what I love about the future casting activity in particular is we look back 10 years and we look forward 10 years. So we rewound to 2016, and we always do a fun little activity where we look at what the top TV shows were and what the top movies were and the top songs and the fashion. And we kind of try to immerse ourselves a little bit into things circa 10 years ago, in this case, 2016. And fun fact, if you are watching Stranger Things right now, which the final season is finally out, I did not realize until I researched this that that actually came out and debuted in 2016. So it has been 10 years since Stranger Things started, which is just wild, but that's a sidebar. And the new season so far is great. I am waiting for the final few episodes to come out. But that being said, right, so if you think back to 2016, I want you to then fast forward to today and think about all of the incredible things that you have been able to accomplish and you have been able to do in your business in these past 10 years, or maybe you've been able to do in your personal life. Maybe you achieve some big milestones and goals and just personal or professional accomplishments that you're really proud of over these past 10 years. And if you think back to 2016, could you have imagined yourself doing those in this 10-year period? A lot of times we can't. And now sometimes we had a vision that didn't quite get realized in the way that we wanted, right? Always the longer the time horizon, sometimes there's a blend of things that are these incredible pleasant surprises and others that can be a bit disappointing. But generally speaking, what tends to be pretty eye-opening for people is recognizing, I was able to do a lot in a 10-year period of time, way more than I ever would have imagined I could have done. And then we look 10 years into the future. And what I always encourage people to do is start to map out some of your big milestones, right? In 2026, I have a big milestone birthday coming. Not super excited about said milestone birthday, but it's coming. So I have that on the calendar. We've got our 5-year anniversary of this podcast. Hard to believe that this has been going for 5 years strong now, new episodes every single week for 5 full years, which is exciting. But that's coming up on February 1st. I'm getting ready to release my first book in 2028. And if you're thinking, why are you talking about something in 2028 now? Well, because I'm going to be working on it for the next 2 years. I have something very specific and intentional that I'm doing around it. And if I didn't map out what it looked like over the next few years, I would not have started it early enough to be able to release it then. And I do have some really cool, really fun opportunities for you to be featured in my book that I will tell you about on a future episode. So stay tuned. But I started looking at what are some of the big milestones and some of the big things that are coming. And now, typically, the further out you get, like 10 years in the future, I know nothing. I'm not entirely sure at all what's going to happen then. And that's fine. But over the next few years, yeah, there's some pretty significant things that are going on. And as you start to map this out, inevitably, what most people realize is there's things that they should be focused on next year that they were not even thinking about, things that they need to either start next year. Like if I said, oh, I'm not publishing my book till 2028, I don't need to worry about it next year, I'll deal with it at the end of next year, I would not be publishing my book in 2028. I needed to be thinking about that then in order to know what I need to do now, like right now, to make that possible. And so starting to frame some of this out gives you a little bit more clarity on some of the things that you should be focused on now. So, highly encourage you to do that. That one is always an eye opening activity. It's kind of fun. Like I said, we do that every time I do an in person retreat. We did that in the virtual retreat. And people had some great takeaways from that. So, grab a piece of paper, just start to map it out, start to draw it out and think about what some of those big things are, might be over the next 10 years. Think about all of it, what you have accomplished and achieved over these past 10 years, and start to see how that might reshape some of what you are planning for 2026. Now, the other thing that we did in our 1-day retreat is not only do we set the roadmap for the year based on the vision, based on where people want to take their business, but we also look at practically what's it going to take to make that possible, right? So it's great to have this vision, but do you have the right support structure to get there? Do you have the right team? Do you have the right systems, the right infrastructure? Like, what do you need to make it possible? And what do you need to make it possible so it's not all dependent on you and you're not having to overwork and burn yourself out in the process of getting there. So we start with vision, we start big, we look at where we're going, then we get more practical about what that's going to look like. And then we actually make sure that the underpinning, the foundation of all of that success from a sustainability perspective is in place to make it possible. And one of the questions that came up, which inevitably comes up, is about team. And so we were looking at hires and who needs what support. And most people needed marketing support. I know for myself right now, I'm hiring someone in a marketing capacity in my business as well. I'm rounding out our team with someone at more of a strategic level from a marketing specialist perspective, digital marketing and social media. So if you are that person, reach out to me. I may still be looking by the time this episode airs. But there were several people who were in the group who were also looking to fill that very same role. Pretty common as we go into the new year that people are looking for that role. And I will tell you, this is another sidebar, but there is a part of me that there is such a gap for this particular role in the market, such a huge, overwhelming gap that I want to go and start a marketing agency so badly, focused on this specific gap in the market, just because I see the opportunity and I see what businesses need. I will not be doing that. I am staying focused on my own lane and on my own things. But if you are looking for something, let's talk because boy, is there a huge opportunity in this space based on just my own needs and that of like every client and every person that I speak to. Anyway, back to today's topic. So, with that being said, there was someone who just brought somebody on and she was questioning, did I hire the right person? And what I was sharing with her is something you've heard me talk about on the show before, that as you're hiring on your team, you don't want to hire at the execution level. You want to hire at the strategic execution level because each level inherits the level below it. And so if you hire at strategic execution, you bring someone in who is not only capable of setting the strategy for your social media or for your marketing, but they are also capable of and responsible for executing on it. So they both come up with the plan as well as do the implementation. They do the engagement. They're the kind of person who partners with you from a strategy perspective and then fully makes it happen and owns the results and the outcomes. And that's very different than the person who tactically comes in and just does a few social media posts and calls it a day, right? So this is the type of person that everyone was like, yeah, that's what I need. I need the person who's going to own the outcomes, who's going to be measuring things, the person who's going to understand what our strategy is and when we want to do launches or what our targets are for the year. and who's able to take buyers on an actual journey and who's going to take buyers on the journey that they need to go on in order to make the buying decisions that we're looking for them to make in the business, right? So again, it's that person who could be a bit more strategic, who deeply understands marketing strategy, and can roll up their sleeves and get stuff done and adapt as they need to. And so she was talking about the person that she had brought on, and she said, I get the idea of strategic execution. Makes total sense. It's exactly what I want. But what questions would I ask somebody when I'm hiring? And how would I know when I'm talking to someone if they're execution or if they're strategic execution? It's a really great question. So I want to share with you what I shared with her. So whether you're bringing someone in for marketing, for social media, for operations, for any of the different functions in your business, highly, highly encourage you to bring them in at a strategic execution level, not an execution level. And if you are, here's a couple of the questions that I had shared with her that you can ask in the interviewing process to try to start to distinguish if they are at the right level. So one of my favorites is day in the life questioning. So what I will typically say is, all right, so here's what we have going on. Coming up on, this particular quarter, we're going to be doing this and this and this. We have this launch event coming up. Here's our target and here's what we're going to be focused on. I want you to walk me through day in the life. Give me an example of how you would approach your work. How would you approach making sure that we're communicating about these events and that we're achieving these results? The reason why I love the day in the life question is you can learn so much about how someone thinks and about how someone approaches something by their answer. If their answer is, well, I would make sure that I get all of the dates from you, and then I would look and make sure that I was posting according to the schedule of number of times I need to post each week. And then I would make sure that I was checking the comments. And then I would make sure and their answers become more checkbox oriented in nature and making it sound like they're waiting for you to tell them everything that they need to know. And then they're just basically going and doing the things. They are thinking at an execution level. They are not thinking at a strategic execution level. And as soon as I mentioned that to her, she was like, oh, yeah, I think this person's at an execution level. And I suspected that they probably were based on a couple of the things that she shared. But if instead they come back and they say, great, so what we would do is I would want to have a strategy session with you. I would want to understand a little bit more about the market, some of the specific things that we want to be talking about and hitting on for this. And then what I would do is I would put together this series of campaigns. I would make sure that we were tracking it each week. I'd make sure that we were reviewing the results and we could be looking at any changes that we need. Right now, I'm thinking that we would probably do this based on what I know of your business and your target market, but I'd want to test that and I'd want to confirm that that's working the way that we want to. If we do this by this point, we'll have the ability to adapt and make some changes if we're not seeing the results that we want, right? If all of a sudden you're starting to get that sort of answer back where they're showing that they're owning, they're sharing results with you, they're going to be bringing new strategies and ideas to you based on those results. That is a strategic execution person. And you didn't have to ask a whole bunch of different questions that they could have, like, on the side been asking ChatGPT to spit out some answers for them, because people absolutely do that in interviews. But that being said, they're more walking you through how they work and how they think, so you can immediately pick up if they are strategic execution or more execution based. Now, there's certainly a lot that you can ask too about ownership. One of the things that I always, always, always look at from ownership is, do they own tasks or do they own outcomes? Right? If they're someone who is very focused on the results themselves and the outcomes and who can communicate to you the why behind the what, like why they do what they do. It's not just, oh, I post on Instagram 3 times a week. I post on LinkedIn twice a week. I create reels and edit videos, right? It's not that they do those things. It's, oh, the business that I'm working with, they're trying to grow this year. They have this really big mission to do this thing. And here's the market that they're trying to reach. And so where I come in is I try to help them leverage social media to achieve those goals. Right now, we're focused on Instagram and LinkedIn. And I've recommended to them that we explore using YouTube more. And here's some of the ways that we're doing it. Right now, what we're experimenting with is we're doing 3 times a week on Instagram. We're doing twice a week on LinkedIn. Here's how it's going. Total different answer. Total different answer. Again, similar version to a day in the life, but you can hear in those things that I said how differently someone thinks about what they do. The first person was tactically, I am posting this many times per week. I am doing this particular thing. The second person was like, I understand why I'm here. I understand what I'm supposed to be achieving for the business. I understand what the mission and the goals are, and here's how I plug into it, and here's what I'm doing to make it happen. So as you are looking at and interviewing and bringing people into your team, use some of these types of questions and types of prodding to get to understand more if you are hiring the person who is going to just create a whole lot more work for you, and you are going to have to tell them every single thing to do, and you're going to create the delegation boomerang that you hear me talk about all the time. Or if instead you are going to bring someone into your team who is a strategic thinker, who will take ownership and who will actually achieve outcomes and free you from having to be involved in every decision and every detail. So that was just a little bit of insight into our strategic planning workshop that we held this year. If you missed it and you would like to get access to it, right now when you join me inside Soul Collective, you will get access to the replay that will be available for a little bit longer through the end of January, depending on when you're listening to this. So head to strategicopsinstitute.com/collective and go ahead and join us, and you will get access to that replay. It is not too late to put your strategic plan in place for next year or to adapt and uplevel the one that you currently have. But either way, I hope that these 2 tips that I shared with you with some of the future casting and how to test to see if you're bringing someone in at a strategic execution level versus an execution level are really helpful as you frame out and set yourself up for success and scale next year. I will see you again next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Simplify to Scale. If you'd like to take things further, I invite you to join me for my Scale Smarter, Not Harder interactive workshop. Head to strategicopsinstitute.com/scale smarter to get registered. Not only will we dive into what might be keeping you trapped in the day-to-day, but you'll have the opportunity to ask me your questions live. If you got value out of today's episode, I'd love if you'd take a moment and rate and review the show so more businesses can learn to scale more simply and sustainably. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and I'll see you again next week.